One. Welcome to Mock 10 Sports, guys. Appreciate you joining us on this special episode of Mock 10 Sports, the 2023-2024 SEC basketball preview show with my guy Max Barr here from Southeastern 14, basketball junkie. Follow him on Twitter. Max, you want to tell everybody where to follow? At Max Barr, is that correct?
Yep, Max Barr, CDB, MAXBARR, can't miss it. Also over at Southeastern 14, daily videos, daily previews, betting previews. Gonna have a whole bunch of stuff this season. But I mean, we're here, Dave. We're a week away. Oh my gosh,
dude! It feels like yesterday we were wrapping up the tournament. I can remember Alabama losing on that Friday to San Diego State. There was like a tornado in the area. Me and my wife and the dog had to go get in a bath. It was almost like, man, that feels like yesterday that the season was wrapping up, and now it's, dude. We got, like you said, November 6th. All these matchups on Monday. It's crazy.
It hasn't even hit me yet. I'm like a kid waiting for Christmas right now. And
I know it's sweatshirt, hoodie season. There's a little frost on the car.
Yeah.
You got college hoops next week, man.
Man, what a time to be alive.
No, dude. So just before we quickly review just the 2022-2023 standings, we'll go back and review that. What are your just initial thoughts on why the SEC here in the past 3 to 5 years is kind of grown to be one of the more top three? Some may say this year it's between them and the Big 10 or Big 12. For the best overall conference. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a multi-part answer, but to make it quick, I think it comes down to money and coaching. I think that's what, if you want to just make it simple, money and coaching. Coaching wise, is there a conference with better coaching top to bottom? I mean,
especially when you add it. I mean, think about it. You're adding in. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you're adding in a guy like Chris Beard that wasn't fired from Texas. Now, granted, we're not talking about the off the court stuff, but right. I mean, they were ranked number 1, number 2 when he got fired, and he's won everywhere he's been.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it starts with the coaching. I mean, this conference and these programs have done a phenomenal job bringing in the best of the best when it comes to coaching. But then you look at the other side of it, on the more business side of things in college, and these schools are massive. These are your premier football schools that rake in money. And I think it's starting to show that these programs are understanding the product that is college basketball, and they're starting to invest a little bit more into it. I think we're seeing that in the coaches that are being brought in, and now with NIL money, the amount of players they're able to recruit. You saw, I mean, the SEC just dominated the transfer portal this offseason, just dominated it. I think that just goes to show what these programs have been putting into place over the past few years.
No, you're 100% right. Also, too, like I think Cal said it. John Calipari said it at SEC Media Days. He's like, when I first got in the league, he's like, it was really us in Florida when Billy was there. And like now he's like, dude, like it's like you mentioned, look at all the coaches across. I mean, Rick Barnes, Nate Oates, Eric Musselman, Chris Beard, Chris Jans. I mean, Todd Golden still a little bit to be determined. I mean, you got Buzz Williams. I mean, like you said, it goes. If the list goes on, it's like you said, is there a better set of coaches in another conference across the country? I don't know what that is, but you're right. I think it's also a big investment from the universities, understanding that like, hey, we can be good in football and basketball as well. Like it's possible to be good at both. But before we move on. Let's pull up the standings from last year. Let's just go back in time for just a minute. Let me pull it up. This is how every team, on ESPN. Appreciate ESPN.
There we go.
The 2022-23 season. Obviously, Alabama won the SEC regular season and conference tournament. Finished 31-6 overall, 16-2 in the league. They kind of. I mean, where'd you have them preseason ranked last year, Max? Going into the year.
Who was that you're asking?
Alabama.
Sorry, I was looking at Alabama. I had them like 6th or 7th. I was not very, because there was just so many question marks. I didn't know Noah Clowney was going to be this first-round draft pick. I didn't know Brandon Miller was going to be the best player. I mean, there was the hype around them. They had the frame and the prototype, but, I mean, everything that could have clicked for Alabama last year did. Everything.
It was the perfect combination. Charles Bediako took that next step as a defender.
Everything.
Yep. And Texas A&M kind of got a slow start in non-con. I mean, they went 0-3, and I forget that South Carolina tournament. They were in that where where was it, Myrtle Beach tournament, I think, around Thanksgiving last year and went 0 for 2 or 0 for 3. I remember they got hot. 15-3 in conference, finished 25-10, made the tournament. Penn State was on fire in the first round, which would eliminate the Aggies. Who else we had? Then we had Kentucky coming in at 3, 22-12 overall, 12-6. Missouri, kind of the surprise team last year. Would you agree, Max? It kind of came from nowhere to finish in that top 4.
Yeah, I would say both Missouri and Vandy kind of surprised. We're in the preseason right now, and we're trying to rank right now. That's what we're trying to do. Just look at Kentucky. Their overall record's 22-12. Then go all the way down there to Arkansas. Theirs is 22-14.
Yeah.
Barely separating these teams is a few baskets in a few
or a
games.
few in Arkansas's case last year, just a few injuries. Think about it. If Trevon Brazil's never hurt or Nick Smith hitting out for majority of the season. What's Arkansas's record? Let's just say they have hit the perfect storm 95% or just get a real good injury luck standpoint. Both those guys never get hurt. What's Arkansas last year? I think they probably finished in the top 4. I know it's crazy to say for a team that finished 9th or 10th there, but those are two big guys they were missing, and they just struggled kind of with some young cats there. But you're right, Missouri, Vandy coming on. Tennessee just struggled to score last year as Kai Ziegler went out to end the year. We talked about Vandy. Auburn, a little disappointing last year, I thought, a little bit. 21-13, 10-8. They were never really on the cusp of missing the tournament, but they were getting there a little bit. They ended up with being a 9 seed, facing Iowa in that first game and ultimately losing to Houston. But again, Auburn last year would show there'd be games you'd be like, man, they look pretty good. They were beating Houston at 10 last year at the half.
And I swear by this. I think Auburn was going to go on to win that game if it wasn't for Jalen Williams picking up a cheap third foul.
Yeah, and they could make some free throws. What were they from the free throw? I was at the game. They were horrific from the free throw line. They missed 16 or 17 free throws. It was bad.
This is the thing. When I'm looking back at these standings, it's kind of like the tale of two sides. You have a bunch of good teams that kind of underperformed. You got Tennessee, Auburn, Florida, and then you have some teams you didn't think so good that really, just came out of nowhere. Texas A&M, wow. Vanderbilt, wow. Missouri, wow. And it kind of just clumped everyone together.
You could even throw Mississippi State in there. Chris Jancis, they could have scored it all. They probably win a game or two in the tournament.
It just kind of made everything squish together, and there was almost no separation between these teams.
No, there really was. You had your bad teams, like the bottom 3. White kind of got the most out of that Georgia team last year. But really, the bottom 3, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and LSU were just really bad last year.
Yeah.
And even South Carolina, lost Alabama in overtime last year. Game they easily could have won. They lose G.G. Jackson. We'll talk about them here in a bit. But just wanted to go through the standings last year. This is where they stood at the end of the 2022-2023 season. The SEC with 8 teams making it to the NCAA tournament. Stop share the screen there. We'll go back here. All right, just before we get into just some quick questions getting in here before we really start unveiling our 1 through 14, 14 through 1. How many teams do you truly see in this league being able to compete for the regular season championship this year, Max?
So when I was breaking it down, I think there's 3 that can compete. And then I'll throw in an extra 1 because of something I'm probably missing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm saying 4 is my answer. So I'll say I think Tennessee, Arkansas, and Kentucky all have either the talent, the veteran leadership, the star power, however you want to call it. I think those 3 have what it takes to contend for a championship. And then I think there is a group outside of that in Auburn, in Florida, if you like Alabama, if you like Texas A&M, whoever you like outside of that top 3, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think they're also, I think one of them will also 100% be in. I don't know who, but I'm going to say 4. I think there's going to be 4 teams that are really, really good.
So you kind of separate it into your, so you're going to go Kentucky, Tennessee, not in that order, but Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas. You're leaving room for a slide team, maybe, like I saw your maybe somewhere Auburn, Florida, Alabama down the road, somebody like that. Yeah, and then you got your next year. I'm with you. I think a little bit, just from watching some of those exhibitions, Tennessee, man, when they went on the road to the Breslin Center and beat Michigan State without Vescovy and Ziegler, that's impressive. I'm liking the Dalton Connect kid.
Don't even get me started on Connect. I love this guy. I love this guy. And what I'm kind of getting troubled with is people are saying, it's exhibition. It doesn't matter. It
Yeah.
doesn't even matter. Now, I'll put it this way. If half the starting lineup is out and there's no fans there and it's a closed scrimmage and it's just the coaching, okay, yeah, they're basically practicing out there. But this was like all the players are like, it felt like a real game.
Yeah.
Like they were playing their hearts out. So I'm putting weight into it for sure.
Same with the Arkansas Purdue one, and it wasn't televised, but I listened to the Alabama Wake Forest one, and that was almost a tale of two halves. Alabama shooting like 60% from three in the first half. Sam Walters could hit any jumper. It seemed like he shot in that first half. And then they couldn't stop anybody in the second half, and they let Wake Forest multiple guys go for 30 points. Now, I know, again, nobody could foul out in that game. Alabama was missing Mark Sears, but also, Wake Forest is missing a couple starters too. So it goes both ways. Then you had, what was the other exhibition we had? Mississippi State, Southern Miss. Southern Miss won the Sun Belt regular season last year. Didn't make the tournament, but a good test for Mississippi State, especially when you consider they were without Tolu Smith and the guy slips my head. Yep. The Marshall transfer slips my mind as well, but he wasn't playing either. Yep. He wasn't playing either. So,
and then we had a good one with Texas Tech and Texas A&M. Was a really good one.
A&M's 0-2 in exhibitions, aren't they? Lost to Baylor and Texas Tech.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, next question. So we talked about him just a little bit, and this is my guy that I just brought up, Dalton Knecht, the Northern Colorado transfer. It's at Tennessee, going to give them more of a scoring threat, especially from the perimeter. Who are some other newcomers we should be aware as we head into the start of the season next week?
Yeah, so I just handpicked a few out of some of the top teams that I ranked. If we had all time all day, I could go through every team, But I think one guy that's not getting enough attention is Tremont Mark on Arkansas. This is a guy that started every single game for a championship caliber team under Calvin Sampson. The guy knows how to play. He's 6'6" and has that kind of defensive versatility where he can guard multiple positions. His knock has been he's not a knockdown shooter. He might have fixed that with how well he just shot against Purdue. He banged the three to send it to overtime. So I really like Mark on Arkansas. I know they have a plethora of transfers, but he's one guy that I feel like is just kind of slipping through the cracks and is going to be like a 35-minute, kind of guy for them. And then one more guy that I really wanted to touch on and just make sure people are aware this guy is going to be good is Tyrese Samuel. For Florida. He's coming over from Seton Hall, started in the Big East, and if we know something about last year's Big East, man, was it pretty good.
Physical league down there in that
physical league. He's got multiple years guarding Adama Sanogo. He's got multiple years guarding Ryan Kalkbrenner. He's no stranger to quality big men. And not a lot of people are talking about Tyrese Samuel. I think he's going to be a big piece.
And I don't want to skip ahead to our Florida preview yet because we'll talk about them in a minute. But do you think it's more a by committee approach or just him to replace Colin Castleton?
Well, it's interesting now with E.J. Jarvis gone because E.J. Jarvis, the Yale transfer, was a nice little stretch four piece that could slot in there for them and space the floor a little bit more. So I'm not sure what the lineup's going to look like. In the most recent exhibition that Florida played, they started both Tyrese Samuel and Micah Hanlogten. So they started like two traditional centers. I feel like Samuel would obviously be playing the 4 spot if Hanlogten's on the floor, but I'm not really sure how it's going to shake out now. It's kind of up to Golden. He's got some freshmen with Condon and Haw. I'm not really sure.
No, that'll be interesting. And then most people obviously know about the big ones. Grant Nelson coming over from North Dakota State. Then you got the kid I'm real fired up. So, we're talking about Alabama here is Aaron Strada from Hofstra. He's played well in both their exhibitions. Grant Nelson, I feel like still getting his feet a little wet from talking to people that have seen Alabama practice and from listening to that audio the other day against Wake Forest. You can tell shooting's not fully there yet. It'll be interesting to see how they are there. And I'm trying to think Alan Flanagan. Auburn fans will be familiar with Alan Flanagan transferring, going to Ole Miss with his dad. Just trying to think some more off the top of my head, some other guys around the league. We talked about the Marshall transfer going to Mississippi State. I kind of like the Mack kid, BJ Mack kid from South Carolina, or from Wofford. Speaking of, I think Wofford's beating them by like 15 right now at halftime.
Yeah, a little tough, but I mean that just goes to show that this league top to bottom has talent. If we're just quick flying through, Chad Baker Mazara, Auburn.
Denver Jones from Auburn.
Yeah, some good guys on Auburn that aren't getting a lot of credit. Baker Mazzara was one of San Diego State's best players 2 years ago.
Yeah,
really,
you're
really
right.
good.
When I was doing my research for this episode, you're right. You didn't realize it, just from I feel like nationally, the second tier transfers aren't really covered. You obviously got your big name guys everybody talks about.
Yep.
It's like you said from reading that, it's like, dang, that kid sounded like he was pretty good last year. I mean, I hadn't seen him on tape or anything, but he sounded like he's a pretty productive player.
And with how active the SEC was in the portal and how many like these teams all hauled in like 4 guys, there's a lot of hidden gems that it's be impossible to cover every single one of them. We'd be here till midnight.
Oh, dude. Well, it's also these rosters turn over so much. You'd be here, you could name them all day. But transition a little bit to a team that signed the number 1 freshman class, number 1 high school class in America last year. What is your thoughts, this makeup? I thought them adding Trey Mitchell, getting Antonio Reeves back just from a veteran standpoint. I don't know how much he really wanted to be there, but still, Bob Huggins' mistake is Kentucky's gain. What's kind of the makeup of this Kentucky team heading into 23-24 in your opinion?
So originally it was panic mode. Before that Trey Mitchell signing, it was panic mode. Trey Mitchell is huge. He's going to be a 35-minute per game guy at the small ball 5. Initially, I wasn't too high on Kentucky, but when you see it all come together, and you're like, man, this DJ Wagner kid's good, and then you're like, wow, wait, Reed Shepherd is really good, and you're like, oh my gosh, Adu Thiero is 6'8", and he's pretty good. Oh my gosh, I haven't even seen Aaron Bradshaw yet. I haven't even seen Ivisic yet. You're like, wait a second. What am I thinking? This team's not going to be good. Like, they've got some guys. The main thing that I like about this Kentucky team is its speed and its spacing. They are going to fly up and down the court, especially in transition. They're going to be the type of team that long 3 rebound, not even like it's a live ball turnover, long 3 rebound, transition bucket, boom, like that. They're just going to be super fast. I'm going to be looking to bet a lot of Kentucky overs early in the season because, man, they're going to fly.
So you would encourage the listeners to go over with the Kentucky.
I'm telling you right now, they play Kansas in the non-conference. Kansas's defense is much regressed. They don't have the ball screen coverage that they did last year. Kentucky is going to kill Hunter Dickinson's drop coverage with Trey Mitchell at the small ball 5. I really like the over in that game.
That's the Champions Classic this year.
Yep.
Moving on, talk about another team again before we get into our 1 through 14. Is this the season they always do really well? I think Muss would openly tell people his lineup, he experiments with non-conference play and even into early conference play. Is this the year that you actually think they buckle down, have a real chance? They have a real chance, but you see this being the year that they come out of the gate conference play hot instead of it takes a while to get going?
Well, I mean, let's rewind to last year, preseason, right? There was all this hype about this team, the Arkansas, where everyone loved them. They were ranked really high in the preseason, and then their first few non-conference games were going really well. They were looking great. And then they have this game on November 22nd or 29th. I forget which weekend it was, but it was against Creighton at the Maui Invitational.
The semifinal game. Yeah.
Oh, what a game
overtime.
That was.
Yeah.
It was a 90-87 Creighton win. That was just incredible. Arkansas was ranked 9th at that time. Okay. A game later, Brazil goes down for the year and everything starts to fall apart. Brazil doesn't go down. They look like the top 10 team entering conference play.
Yeah.
So it's like, can Muss break through? I feel like last year was that breakthrough, but it just got derailed by the injury bug.
We talked a little bit about that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So can they break through? 100%. I think they already did it last year. We're going to do it last year. They were number 9 before that during that Creighton game. I think they're going to be in a similar run in their big non-conference games this year. They have a few big ones. So my answer, yes. I think they can definitely break through.
No, you make a good point. Again, we talked about the injuries a little bit, but like you said, if they have Trevon Brazile and they have Nick Smith healthy all year, Arkansas is not finishing 9th in the regular season.
Yeah, exactly.
But before we get in our rankings, just the preseason Kim Palm rankings, as we stand heading in to the start of play on Monday. We got Tennessee coming in at number 8, Alabama number 10, Arkansas 14, Auburn 15, Kentucky 18, Texas A&M 24th, Mississippi State 27th, Florida 39th, LSU 47th, Missouri 55th, Georgia 57th, South Carolina 66th, Vandy 79th, and Ole Miss 82nd. So that's according to KenPom as we stand right now. But Max, let's get it started, brother. You can go whatever order you want. I'm following your lead. You start with 1 or 14 first, and I will follow your lead for 1 through 14, our preseason 2023-24 SEC basketball predictions.
All right. Well, let's go bottom to top. Let's go bottom to top. I'm going to start with my bottom team, and a current exhibition that's going on right now is kind of confirming my thought process, and that's going to be South Carolina. I'm going to go with the South Carolina Gamecocks as number 14. And if you ask me, do I think this roster improves from last year?
Can you see the roster on here right now?
Yeah.
Perfect.
If you ask me, does this roster improve from last year? My answer would be yes. You bring in some Power 5 transfers with Cooper and Stuckey, and then you have B.J. Mack, who was a power at a mid-major level. So like, yeah, you have talent. Michi Johnson, returning starter. Josh Gray looked good down the stretch last year. But gosh, their numbers were terrible last year. I mean, their KenPom numbers were horrible. I don't have them on. Yeah. And so with a league that gets so much better, in my opinion, crushed the portal rankings, just every team really made it a point to add shooting and to get better as a whole. This team, I have a hard time moving them up and arguing that they're better than other teams.
Well, let me pull up the South Carolina schedule for us real fast. Let's pull up that, talk about their out-of-conference schedule real fast. And when I talk about South Carolina, we won't go over it. Let me pull up. I pulled it up on their website. Where we go? There we go.
They don't have a ranked team on the non-con, but it is a decent non-con. You get games against Virginia Tech, who's not a bad team at all. You get a game against Notre Dame. You go to Clemson. So there's not a ton on there, but there are tests. It's not just a complete cakewalk. You do have some decent Power 5. It's just no top 25 to make it look nice. You know what I mean?
No, you're right. They got Clemson, Notre Dame out of the ACC. Like you said, nobody it really makes you get all jacked up about some big non-conference game. But again, I'm sure Lamont Paris is not trying to do that. Like, I'm sure he's not trying to load his absolute schedule up from that regard, from that standpoint.
Yeah, coming off of a tough season, I mean, you want to grow confidence because, you know, the higher your confidence is, the better you're going to play in a general sense. But, I mean, November 10th, that first Friday against Virginia Tech, that's a tough ACC opponent, their second game of the year. That'll give us a good idea as if this team has made a jump or if they're still down in the SEC cellar. So we'll see. All
right, South Carolina, I feel like I've seen that a lot, and I was back and forth. I'm actually going to go with someone different here at 14th, Max. I'm going to go with someone different here. I'm going to go, especially with after the news today of Jalen Cook being ruled ineligible, I'm going to go with the LSU Tigers and Matt McMahon's second season. I don't think that's good news. It's bad news bears for old Matt McMahon if they finish how I expect. But the strengths, I mean, he's brought in some guys, some proven guys out of the portal, like we mentioned. I mean, Jalen Cook. I mean, they got the Jordan Wright kid from Vanderbilt that he brought in. And I've noticed the Will Baker kid he brought, the big guy. It's going to be down there with Derek Fountain. The weakness, man, Jalen Cook's out. That means a true freshman, the Williams kid, the Mike Williams kids, you have to step up and take a big chunk of that role out of the point guard position. And then again, just outside of the Will Baker and the Fountain kid who are going to help. I don't really see a lot of guys, real dudes that scare me when I'm game planning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I'm in agreement with you because I have LSU at 13, so I got them right down there.
Well, shoot, let's pull up the schedule. We can knock out two birds with one stone with them. The LSU schedule, like you said, I don't think they're very loaded either. I mean, they got Nichols, Dayton. They're in the Charleston Classic. All right. So they're playing either St. John's or North Texas, kind of going to that the week before Feast Week. So they're in that tournament before the whole feast week starts. North Florida. They got Syracuse at the SEC ACC Challenge.
That's a tough one. That's a sneaky tough one, though.
K-State again. They played K-State in Atlanta last year, if I remember right.
Yeah, and then they get Texas also.
Wasn't that a buzzer beater last year, Max?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, they almost had that. Hell, LSU had a good record at that point. I mean,
I was going to say they looked great. They looked great in the non-con.
Yeah, you're right. Texas will be tough. It's in Houston, and they kind of before they start getting into conference play. But yeah, it's just not real fired up about. Matt McMahon seems like a nice guy. I'm just not overly fired up about that group this year for whatever reason this year. South Carolina would be the easy answer, and right now it'd be the low-hanging fruit of fight too. It's either getting beat by a wall for the Terriers here at halftime. But I'd be shocked. I'm with you though. It wouldn't surprise. I would be shocked if it wasn't one of those two teams that finished last in the league right now.
I think that's a fair way to put it. I think we're in agreement that.
So you got LSU at 13, so we don't have to review them again. So who do you have at 12? At
12. It pains me to put them here because I really like this team, but I have Georgia. But I really like them. I do. I don't think they're a bad team at all. I think they're going to be improved from last year.
Max, you a Mike White guy? You like Mike White?
I don't think he's going to be winning championships at Georgia, but I think his reputation as the ultimate floor raiser holds true. He's gonna have these guys playing solid defense. It's not going to be easy to score on this bunch, but I don't know if he's the guy that's going to take them on the next step. The roster's good. I mean, I look at this roster and I'm like, this team's good.
Their guy, it seems, is who? The Noah Tomlinson kid?
Yeah, and he's a true scorer. Like, if you watch his highlights from Niagara, that guy can really score. And Niagara wasn't that good of a team, and he put up great numbers there. And just wait, when you see Russell Chua, when you see him out there on the floor, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, this guy is massive. Like, it's gonna be tough sliding in the paint against these Bulldogs. It's gonna be tough.
I think I was reading something on the RJ Sonarhara kid. He hadn't really lost a lot. I know he's coming from Division II, but hadn't really lost a lot of games. You're right. This is an interesting. It's better. It's an improved roster for sure. But it's like you said, the league's so much better. Even the Justin Hill kid's good. Jalen DeLoach, I've watched both of them. It's like you said, it's kind of the rest of the league's improved. So it's not really Georgia's fault. I mean, someone's got to finish in those bottom four spots. I mean, Georgia kind of fits the narrative there. But again, I'm with you. I think Mike White's going to get the most out of this team for sure.
Yeah, I mean, out of these bottom three here, I like this team the most by far. The only thing with Sunahara, I'm excited for him, but he exited their last exhibition with a knee injury, and I haven't been able to find a report on how he's doing. So hoping he's fine. But I mean, this is a team that could easily, jump up to and finish 8th, 9th, just because of how hard I feel like they're going to be able to score on. I mean, you got Demery is 6'5". He's going to be their point guard most likely. Thomason's 6'4". Melendez 6'7". I mean, you're rarely going to have someone on the floor under 6'4", under 6'5".
Yeah, again, they're a little bit – they got a better roster than LSU to me, but looking at it, again, it's almost like who is your big bucket scorer? I guess it would be the Tomlinson kid. It would be the one they would say right now if we're tipping off tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the issue. That's why I don't have them too high. The scoring is going to be a little bit of an issue. And I think the Mississippi State team from last year would probably be pretty comparable to this Georgia team. They're going to be rock solid. So you think
Mississippi State's a good comparison for people listening out here for this Georgia team? In your opinion?
Yeah, rock solid on defense, but just really struggles to put the ball in the basket. That's kind of what I'm looking like for this Georgia team.
Let's take I actually have Georgia at 12 too, so we're both talking about it at the same time. Let's actually talk about Georgia's schedule. Opening up with Oregon in Las Vegas at T-Mobile Arena, the Naismith Hall of Fame series. That'll be good. That's one of the better opening night games right there, honestly, at least from the SEC standpoint.
Yeah, it is. I'm excited for it. The second that line drops, I'm going to be taking the under. Oregon's got some trees with Biddle and Folly Dante. Neither team's going to be able to get anything easy around the rim. First game of the year, and all these teams have new pieces. I think that one's going to be a little bit of a rock fight. I know we're going to be excited to watch college basketball, but it might not be the cleanest college basketball.
The cleanest, prettiest game. Heck, then they got Wake Forest, who, as we talked about previously, beat Alabama, I think 88-80 the other day in a scrimmage. Yeah. Wake Forest should be improved. Seen the Bahama Mar Hoops Bahama Championship. They got Miami in a Final Four team from last year. Then they get the winner or loser of K-State Providence. 2 tournament teams as well last year.
And also they go to what should be a little bit of an improved Florida State team. So, I mean, I like this non-con. You got a few opportunities to get a few what they like to call a quad one win. I mean, you got about 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 games that could be in contention.
So you like Florida State to be improved a little bit this year?
Yeah, I mean, I trust Leonard Hamilton. I don't think they're going to be as bad as last year. I'll put it that way.
All right, Max. Moving to 11th. Who you got?
All right, 11. Now this one is where I'm going to be from now on. My rankings are all over the place. No one's going to be agreeing with them at all. But I've got Missouri, and I've got Missouri down here because they won a ton of close games last year. A lot of games they shouldn't have won, in my opinion. And they lose a ton. And they were so unique last year. They were such a unique small ball, just run and gun, force a ton of turnovers. They were such a unique team, and they don't have the guys to play like that this year. Tanjay and Grill are really good, but they're not. I'm sorry, but they're not Kobe Brown.
Yeah, how much do you think Grill transitions over from Iowa State?
Grill I don't understand Grill because in the beginning of that season last year, I was like, oh my gosh, this might be one of the better 3-and-D guys in the country when he dropped 30 on UNC. But then we learned, okay, UNC's kind of falling apart and their perimeter defense is awful. And Grill kind of, comes back down to earth and then gets dismissed from the team. So I don't know. I've heard people say this guy's going to lead Missouri in scoring. And I've heard people say he's going to be coming off the bench and he might not add that much. What's your take on Caleb Grill?
On Missouri or Grill?
Grill.
I'm with you. I mean, it kind of sounded like he got kicked off the team. I don't really know what his attitude is, but from listening to Dennis Gates during the preseason, it kind of sounds like he's an easy kid to coach. I mean, he's saying what he's supposed to be saying. It'll be interesting. The thing that worries me with Mizzou, I have them a little higher than you. If I'm being honest, I have them at 10th. The thing, they weren't good on defense last year, and they struggled to rebound. I don't really know. For them to improve, in my opinion, the Noah Carter kid's going to have to really elevate his game, who was more of a role guy for him last year just because of Kobe Brown.
Yeah. And you're going to be asking Nick Otter to score a lot more.
Which I don't like that. You're right. And they got the Cammies. They kind of have a bunch of their role guys. The Sean, I want to call him Cammies. Sean East, the second.
Yeah.
They feel like they got a lot of their role guys back, their bench guys, but they don't have any of their key. I mean, I thought Demoy Hodge, massive loss. Everybody wants to talk about Kobe Brown, but I thought Hodge was a big player for him last year.
Hodge was tied with Brandon Miller for the lead in the SEC in threes last year.
Yeah.
I mean, he was massive. And then my main knock on them all offseason was they're going to have no rim protection, no rebounding. And then they get Vanover. And
he's back in the SEC. He's back in the SEC, man.
I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of Vanover. I mean,
he is what he is. Yeah. He's kind of a snoozer. Doesn't really move that well, just kind of there.
Yeah, I mean, he did all right at Oral Roberts. But, I mean, that one game against Duke, he just looked putrid. So I'm not a big fan of this team. You're going to have to get a ton out of Grill, Tanji, Honor. Like those guys are all just going to have to really break out of their shells. And I don't know if I want to be counting on that.
Let's look at the schedule for the old Missouri Tigers before we move on a little bit. Yeah. Here we go.
Decent non-con. I like this one. I'm not going to lie.
That Memphis matchup's interesting, especially with how old Memphis is.
Yeah, and I'm telling you right now, that crowd is going to be rocking for that one.
They get Minnesota in Minneapolis.
The late non-con is where it really heats up in December. They've got a tough December.
Yeah, you're right. They do. So they play. I mean, Wichita State. What are they supposed to be like this year? That game was close last year. I think it was an overtime game. They barely escaped in Wichita.
I haven't done much research on Wichita, but I always think they'll be decent.
Shocker. Then they get Kansas in Lawrence.
At Kansas. Then you come home, you got to play Seton Hall, and then
Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, that's a gauntlet of a December.
They beat Illinois bad last year, didn't they?
See, that's what happened. That's what this last year's team offered. Like they were so fast and they made so many shots that they could just kind of run some slower teams out of the building. And if Missouri got ahead of you and you weren't making shots, they were. That was kind of the thing was they would just out offense you. They weren't stopping anybody on the defensive end really.
No, you're right. Missouri, so your big concern on them right now is just where do they fill in those gaps of Hodge and Brown?
Yeah, I mean, because the offense was what made this thing tick last year, and it's obviously not going to be as good. So you're counting on that defense to take a massive leap, and I just don't think it does.
No, I agree too. The rim protection does concern me. But my 11th ranked team here, I think you're a little higher on them than I am, and I like him as a head coach. He was the SEC coach here. Vanderbilt got the doors coming in right now. They pull up the roster for the Commodores. Obviously, they got Tyron Lawrence. They got Ezra Mangin. I mean, the weaknesses, though, in my opinion, who's just going to give them just consistent minutes? My opinion, the ceiling, I think this team's a top 7 finish, NCAA tournament appearance. I think the floor could be the bottom 4 of the league, too. I hate to sound like that. But that's just kind of where I think they are from that standpoint right now. What do you say about the Commodores?
Out of every team in the SEC, I think this is the hardest team to pick. I'll be honest when I'm saying that because they have 2 very good guards. Yeah. And if you pick them low, everyone's going to say, well, there's no way they finish that low with those 2 guards. That's one of the best duos in the conference. And then if you pick them high, people are going to say, well, they have 0 front court. They lost Liam Robbins and they don't really have any rim protection. And so it's basically, how well does this front court perform? That's the question with this team. Because I know what I'm going to get out of Ezra Mannion and Tyron Lawrence. They're going to be good.
And they brought in the Notre Dame transfer, right? The Vin, Allen, and Lubin.
Yeah, and he played sporadically last year, but he looks good to me. I watched him a little bit last year, and I watched him this summer, and he looks good.
Yeah, I mean, he had 17. He averaged 17 minutes, 6.2, 4.4 boards. Like you said, solid, but I mean, he's not Liam Robin. You're not replacing that. Yeah.
You're not replacing, defensive player of the year in the conference type of thing. I really like Colin Smith to break out, the 6'8" sophomore. He's got a nice shot, pretty athletic. But outside of that, I think Lee Dort is going to come back from an injury soon. He's been injured for a while. I think you got a bunch of 3-star freshmen that, some of them might break out. But, I mean, outside of Lawrence and Mannion, it's just question marks everywhere.
Pull up the Commodore schedule. No, you're right. It is question marks. Were you all right with him winning the Coach of the Year last year?
It wouldn't have been my vote.
That's how I'm in a basketball group with my buddies because I went to school in Alabama, so I have a bunch of the buddies who are in there, and I kind of got hell. I thought it should have been either Nate Oates or Buzz Williams, but
I was going to say Buzz.
Yeah, just the way they played in conference play. Yeah, but Stack's a good coach. I mean, you always hear the rest of the other coaches talk so highly about him from an X's and O's scheme standpoint. But it's like you said, it's like they didn't even make the tournament. Like, it's nothing against them, but it's just kind of like, man, I thought the bar be. I mean, if like you had 2 pretty clear candidates, I mean, you even could have made a case for Chris Jans making the tournament his first year.
Yep, I mean, and. Yeah, they didn't make the tournament, and they didn't make the tournament because, I mean, this team wasn't that great last year. I mean, they were 10th in the conference on KenPom to finish.
Yeah.
Like they won a lot of close games, and they won the games they needed to in conference play. But I mean, so outside of that stretch, they didn't do much last year.
Yeah, and Liam Robbins was out for a bit, but it looks like they're big non-conference. The Vegas showdown, they get NC State. And it looks like the winner or loser, depending on what they do against NC State and BYU and Arizona State. They get BC, Boston College, and the ACC SEC Challenge.
They get a tough game at home against Texas Tech. I think Grant McClaslin will have that squad playing pretty well. So that'll be a good test.
They go at Memphis as well.
Yes, I guess we'll kind of have a better idea of this team after they play that NC State game.
Yeah, no, you're right. All right, moving to 10th. Who you got there, brother?
Killed 2 birds with 1 stone there. I got Vandy at 10. I think they're out of the bottom four, I think they're the most experienced with that backcourt duo. So that's why I gave them the bump. But I really like Georgia also out of that bottom group.
Now, I meant to ask you. Now we're a little bit out of the four range. What is kind of you feel like for these teams we've discussed already? I mean, you've kind of been in the same area. We talked about Vandy, Missouri. Like, kind of, what is your going back to Missouri a little bit here? Just what is kind of the ceiling floor in your opinion? For those two for that team?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Vandy and Mizzou, I think they're a little bit similar. I think you're going to see a lot of rankings, a lot of polls are going to have Vandy and Mizzou pretty close to each other. And I would say for both of them, ceiling would be like that 7 range. I wouldn't call them top half teams.
Yeah.
I think the league's very, very good. But if they if they really do well and similar to last year, you go 5-0 in games decided by 6 points or less. Something like that. You just find a way to win close games. One of those teams I could definitely see making, 7, 8, 9.
7, 8, 9. And you think Georgia, LSU, and them are kind of, hey, if they're on the NIT, you feel like it's kind of for Mike White's second season before we move into this next group of teams?
I would lump Georgia in with Missouri and Vandy. I think they can just because that defense. I feel like the defense is really going to be good. They've got a lot of length. And Mike White's he's been in the conference for a while. He kind of knows what he's getting into. In contrast to Matt McMahon and Lamont Paris, I think they're kind of in a bottom tier for me.
So would you be surprised if Georgia made the tournament? That'd be just a total shocker in your opinion?
It would be a shock if they were a top 7 seed. If they were really if they had a good seed. But if they squeak in there as a 10, I could see it.
Absolutely. Well, my 10th team, we talked about them too. I had Missouri coming in there.
We go.
So me and you talked about. So me and you were in the same ballpark, really 10 through 14. We had a couple of different spots moving, but it was really Tennessee, Vandy, Georgia, South Carolina, and LSU were kind of those teams me and you knocked out. But I'm going to hand it to you. Who do you have here at 9th?
This is where it gets bad. This is where no one's going to agree with me. And that's okay because in my opinion, I have decent reasoning. This is probably – I don't think anyone in the country has this team as low as I have them. I think I'm the lowest out of everybody. I have Texas A&M at 9.
I saw that earlier. I'm going to pull up the Aggies roster.
The reason I have –
what, in your opinion, why?
Okay, so if you go back to last year, their non-con was not that great. They did not do that well. They really just had an outstanding conference season. They found ways to win at home, and they found a 5, 6, 7-man rotation that just worked really well together. They had guys that knew how to play together. They were 6th in KenPom in the conference. So, they won a lot of close games. I know winning matters, but when you take it as a whole and you take the performance as a whole, their offensive rating and their defensive rating, they were middle of the pack. And I think that showed down the stretch when they were on neutral floors and the games matter. Neutral floor game matters against Alabama, they get crushed. Neutral floor game matters against Penn State, crushed. And I don't think that defines the whole season. I just think it kind of exposes a little bit of a weakness. And so take that into consideration. The point I'm trying to make there is I think they're closer to the 6th team last year than they were as they actually finished as 2nd. Then you lose Dexter Dennis, who did a little bit of everything for this team.
Their best defender.
Best defender, led the team in rebounds, could shoot threes. He was a veteran, senior. He's on an NBA squad right now, so the guy was ultra talented. You lose him and you replace him with either Jace Carter, with Eli Lawrence, with Hayden Hefner, Manny Obaseki. I don't really know who's going to be that wing go-to guy. Whoever it is, I think it's a downgrade from Dexter Dennis. So take that into consideration. And now we don't have Julius Marble. I don't know what's going on with Julius Marble.
Yeah, it sounds like what Buzz Williams made it sound like it was kind of out of his hands. It was in the university's hands.
Yeah, they called it a university process. I have done deep digging. I cannot find any information. My assumption, and this is not what's happening, I don't know. But if they say university process, I'm thinking it's some sort of academic issue, some sort of ineligibility academically. with either credits or plagiarism. I don't know, but it's something serious is going on where they can't speak on it, and it's keeping him out of almost everything. So you don't have Dexter Dennis.
Joining us, Julius Marble, he's the Michigan State transfer that came in, played in that front court for the Aggies last year. So you said they really weren't a great scoring team. They just got to the free throw line a lot, and they rebounded the ball on the offensive end of the court really well. But it's like you saw in the NCAA tournament. I'll agree with you on this standpoint here, Max. You're right. If a team shot well against them, A&M was going to lose. You saw, like you said, with Alabama in the SEC tournament championship game, and then you saw it with Penn State in the first round of if a team was shooting well, they weren't coming back. They were banking because as you know, they're Buzz Williams' defense. They're going to give up perimeter shots, and if you're cold like Alabama, remember Alabama then played twice within a week, and it was like two totally opposite games. Like Alabama went there, kind of already had the league wrapped up, last game of the regular season, and Bama kind of shot poorly, made a run, kind of came back, but A&M pulled away. In the championship game, though, Alabama was shooting well and kind of ran them off the floor, especially this last 10 minutes of the second half.
Yeah. So, just for those two reasons, if you don't have Julius Marble and you don't have Dexter Dennis, outside of Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford, they're both very good. Don't get me wrong. But, I'm struggling to find a difference between – and obviously coaching is there. But, roster-wise, how is this team much different than a Vanderbilt who has two really good guards? And then outside of maybe one other guy, there's a lot of question marks. They have Henry Coleman.
Yeah.
Outside of that, you're looking at Solomon Washington and Anderson Garcia. Is that a top 3 team in this conference this year? If you're asking me, no.
So this team would be, in your opinion, if let's just say perfect world, the rankings go as Max Barr's rankings go for here as we're talking tonight, what you posted on social media, this would by far be the most disappointing team if this is how the rankings are, how the league actually finished.
Yeah, I've seen multiple people pick this team to win the league.
Yeah.
And I just can't see it. Outside of Taylor and Radford, who's going to be the guy for this team? Where's the depth? Where's the scoring? Where's the shooting? I just think we see some major regression. I can totally see the argument though for. I know they've got Wade Taylor. I know he's amazing. It's just I think that they were a little bit overrated coming out of last year, and they didn't really add what I want to see. And with the shooting in the SEC getting so much better next year, I think this team's going to struggle defending teams, and I think we're going to see them drop a good amount of games.
Yeah, Max, I don't have them as low as you. We're talking about them, so I'll tell you, I have them at 3, so I have them finishing the top 4. But I'll say this to kind of piggyback off what you're talking about. I would say they have a low floor, but a low ceiling and a high floor. If that makes sense.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
You know what you're probably going to get with them. But again, let's say they did finish. They finished second in the league last year. Let's say if they go with what I have them at, 3rd in the league. Like I mentioned, 4 starters, 8 rotational guys back. Like you said, a lot of people are predicting Wade Taylor IV to be the preseason player of the year. I'm with you, though. I don't really see – I put – when I was prepping for the show last week, I did ceiling and floor of every team. And I keep meaning to ask you this, so I was apologizing. But, the ceiling for me with this team would probably be the Sweet 16, dude. I just don't see a Final Four team in this roster to kind of piggyback off your ranking. Now, again, I'd be a little shocked if they didn't make the tournament. I think their floor is high, and that's why I think they'll finish in the top 4 in the league. But again, I'm with you. From a ceiling standpoint, I don't think it's some massive ceiling. I think a lot of other teams in the league, kind of where you have them ranked, you can make an argument 6, 7 other teams have higher ceilings than Texas A&M if they're also playing their best as well. But looking at the Aggies' schedule here, open up with Texas A&M Commerce next week. Then at Ohio State. So Ohio State plays 2 SEC teams in non-con. They get Alabama down in Destin to open up that tournament. Then they also, obviously, second game of the year, playing Texas A&M. Texas A&M goes at SMU. They get Oral Roberts. Then they try to get the revenge game against Penn State down in Orlando.
Yeah. That one's going to mean a lot.
Penn State can maybe shoot them out. Then they get the winner or loser, depending what A&M does, of FAU and Butler. I went to that tournament 2 years ago when I was actually working at UCF. We actually played on a Friday against South Florida, and who was in it? Oh, it's the Alabama-Iona game that year. It was when Iona beat Alabama in 20-21.
Yeah, I remember that.
With Patino and them. Then the ACC SEC Challenge. They go at Virginia. They get to Memphis, I feel like, plays every team in the SEC.
Yeah, I know.
Conference. Memphis, Houston. I forget they play Houston on the December 16th. Yep, in Houston.
They got a tough non-con, yeah.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they really do.
This is what
last
I'll
year
say
they
about
really
Texas
last year
A&M.
they really didn't, and they struggled with it. But this year they actually have it, so it'll be interesting to see what they do from that standpoint.
At the beginning of the show, you know how we made that point about last year's SEC, how like the number 4 ranked team there was not much of a difference from like 4 and 9.
No.
It's kind of I'm not trying to cop out here, but it's kind of the same thing where it's like if I have Texas A&M at 9, and I have Auburn or Florida at 5, there's not a ton of difference between those teams at all. It's just a little bit of a personal preference. I'm not saying Texas A&M's the wheels are going to fall off and they're going to be terrible. I think this is an 8-9 bid league, so I still think they're a tournament team. I just think we see more of like they were a 7 seed last year. I think we see something like an 8, 9, or 10.
Yeah. Moving to my 9th place team, I have fighting Chris Beard's Ole Miss Rebels.
Ooh, nice.
At 9th. I went back and forth between 9th and 10th with them pulling up the Rebel roster right now. But yeah, I really think you look at the roster. I mean, it doesn't sound like they're going to get Cisse or Murray real eligible just with the way Jalen Cook goes. If they had those guys eligible, I mean, you see some. Hold on, I had it pulled up. Let's see the Ole Miss basketball. Did it?
I actually saw a tweet from Trilly Donovan today that said Cisse and Murray have already been denied, and they're in the process of appealing.
Yeah, I mean, if they're not going to let the Jalen Cook kid, I'm assuming they're not, because both those guys, I mean, Cisse and coming over from Oklahoma State, which, I mean, he was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, that would be a massive addition. Then Murray's played in this league before, was at Georgetown. You add Alan Flanagan. I also think, I mean, I live here in Oxford, so I've been to a couple of Ole Miss kids. The Matthew Morrell kid, I mean, can take over games at times and be one of the better scorers in the league. And sometimes he just disappears, at least when he was with Kermit. But it's an interesting – I don't know now that both these guys are probably going to be ineligible. I have them at 9th. I'll keep them there just for conversation's sake. But again, I mean, they got the Jemiah Brakefield kids. Not bad. They have some guys to work with. They'll play hard. They'll defend their tail off with Chris Beard. See, didn't you in an earlier projection have them? Didn't you have them higher up, or hell, you may still have them higher up? But did you have them in the top 4 a couple back in the spring?
Like back in June,
right when the season ended.
Look, right when the season ended, I thought Cisse and Murray were going to be playing. I had them, and this was when Kentucky was in abysmal shape.
Dire straits.
So I mean, a ton changed, but yeah, I did have them top 4. I do not have them top 4 without these guys.
Let's go to the Ole Miss kids. Yeah. I mean, that'd be total. I mean, I think a successful year for Chris Beard this year would be if Ole Miss was on the bubble at the end of the year.
Tournament hopeful for this team.
Why am I losing that? There we go. Ole Miss schedule. There we go. All right, so they open up with Alabama State next Monday, Eastern Washington, Detroit Mercy. So they start out right out of the gate with 3 teams they should win. And
this is a bit of a cakewalk.
Yeah, throwback game at the old arena at the Tad Pad, Sam Houston State. You're right. Their first few, Temple, they should win. NC State, I hadn't done a lot of research on NC State. I'll be honest with you. I don't really know what the Wolfpack's looking like this year. Do you?
They'll be they're projected middle of the ACC. They should be the usual mediocre NC State. I'm not expecting much. And
then we should just add Memphis to the SEC in basketball. They play everybody.
This is unbelievable.
Dude, they did last year. Remember they played Auburn and Atlanta? Then 2 years ago, back-to-back years, they played Alabama and Auburn both last year. They always play Ole Miss. And they played somebody, I want to say they played Vandy last year. They always play 4 or 5 SEC teams in non-con. But they come to Oxford this year. That'll be a good matchup. Mount St. Mary's, like Ole Miss always plays UCF for whatever reason. But they play at UCF. Then they play Cal out in San Antonio. Tennessee's in that, right? Tennessee's playing NC State. We'll pull up Tennessee in a minute. Who is Tennessee? Tennessee plays in that. I forget against two. I'm going to say it's an ACC team.
They do, NC State. You were right.
NC State, that was it. Then Troy at home. They play Southern Miss in Biloxi December 23rd, a day before Christmas Eve. That's interesting. Then Bryant, and they open up.
I guess the best games you have on this are maybe a Memphis and at UCF. I mean, it's not a very challenging non-con.
No, yeah, I think Ole Miss is never really good. But probably for Chris Beard's team this year, it's probably not a bad thing to start off just right out of the game, get some wins, see what it goes. But anything else to add on Ole Miss before we move to your 8th?
No, I'll touch on them just a little bit when I get to my
You got
ranking
an
for
eighth.
them. My eighth is who is it? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Oh, Alabama. I'm not too high on Alabama. um, this is another one I'm gonna catch slack for. My
No,
eighth
I,
and
I have
ninth.
my buddies in my basketball group message want me to get you to explain where you have the Tide ranked.
Yeah, so I have them at eighth, and this is why. The defense is not going to be good, just straight up. It's not. That's my main reason. I mean, your front court rotation is going to be probably a starting group of Grant Nelson and Nick Pringle, and then behind that, it's just question marks. It's Mo Wag didn't play much there at West Virginia. You got Diabate, a freshman, Sam Walters, a freshman, Jaron Stevenson, a freshman. Compare this to last year where you got Bediako, Gurley, Clowney, just guys on guys where he's just bodies. Pringle is like a fourth man, fourth string center last year. Like they don't have the bodies this year, so they're not going to be able to just bully you like they did last
McGee
year.
In the other front court addition, Muhammad McGee from West Virginia, he's banged up right now.
He hasn't played, so yes, Grant Nelson's going to be good, and yes, Aaron Estrada is going to be good, and Rylan Griffin's going to be good. Mark Sears has been injured, but I think he's going to be healthy. I think they're just kind of keeping him out as precaution.
Yeah, that sounds like I think he's going to play on Monday.
I think he'll be fine.
Yeah.
I
mean, I have a little bit of a question mark on Mark Sears being like a predominant scorer last year. I mean, he didn't really always. I mean, he's obviously did well, was second leading scorer for Alabama, but him as the main guy this year, it'll be interesting to see. No, I mean, I'm with you. I don't have Alabama eighth, but I mean, to not think Alabama has zero question marks and they're for sure top team to finish in the top four in the SEC this year, I think is a little naive. I'm with you. I mean, it's a little concerning that you've given up 85 points in back-to-back scrimmages. That's a little bit. I know. Again, take it with a grain of salt. It's like the old classic coach. It's probably not as good as it is, and it's probably not as bad as it seems either. But again, if you're Nate Oates, I mean, you banking on your team having to go score 80, 85 plus a game for you to go win. I know every game's not going to be like that, but for 75, 80% of your season, I mean, it's like you said, Nick Pringle seems like he's got his foul troubles under control a little bit. But again, when he's the primary guy, you're going up against Janai Broome, Tolu Smith when he comes back, gets healthy. How's that going to be?
Exactly.
I'm with you. Like Alabama does. Now, let me ask you this. If I told you they had, because I think if they did have this guy back, if they had Charles Bediako back, they probably don't get Jaron Stevenson with them, but I think they could probably still sell getting Grant Nelson because he could play 1 through 5. But let's just say they had Charles Bediako back. What is your feel for Alabama at this point if he's on this team?
Immediately top half. Top half finish. I mean, this guy, you're talking like a top 2, top 3 rim protector in the nation.
But probably best overall rim protector in the SEC.
There, yeah, we'll put it at that. And I think they expected to have him. He was kind of a surprise departure there. That's why I have them so low. And that's why San Diego State was like one of the only teams in the country that could kind of match up with this team because they had just grown men
with a lot of mass. They were physical.
You couldn't out-tough them. This Alabama team's not out-toughing anyone. They're going to have to score and score and score and score.
No, you're 100%. Hey, Sam Walters, the true freshman they signed from, as you can see right here, the Villages in Florida, is in these 2 scrimmages, he's been filling it up, man. He's been shooting 50%. But again, I think a little bit, it may not rear its ugly head in non-con, but when teams start getting more film, he's a little bit of a liability right now defensively because his feet are kind of heavy. Like you go back and watch him a little bit, it's like, dude, once teams start kind of getting a feel like, so it'll be interesting to see how many minutes Nate Oates gives him if he can't defend it, if he's a liability out there defensively. You're right. Alabama, I don't think anybody's worried about them from a standpoint of like scoring. I don't think that's
not at all.
They're going to get their points. But again, this year you're putting a lot of pressure, maybe a little bit going back to the 21-22 season when they finished 6th in the SEC where scoring wasn't an issue. They just didn't defend as well. I mean, Alabama's, I think, under Nate Oates is always going to be good. They're always going to score. But how good will they be is always going to depend, like you said, defensively. Both years they've won the SEC championship and tournament, they've been top 10 in Ken Palm in defensive efficiency.
Yep, exactly.
Let's pull up
So
the
yeah,
schedule here. I mean, this
but also I'm not saying now I'm being harsh on them. Still a tournament team.
Yeah,
You know,
you're not coming out here being like they're missing the tournament. You're just like,
no,
it wouldn't shock you if they come out here and finish 8th just specifically because of the defense. But I mean, NATO, it's always schedules a murderer's row. Morehead State's projected to win their conference. I think Indiana State's projected. I think Sal's supposed to finish in the top half of the Sun Belt.
December is wild.
Ohio State, again, this is their second SEC. Second time we've seen them pop up on a non-con. They play at Texas A&M. I think they're projected to be, middle of the pack, Big Ten.
And people like them as like a sleeper. They're a little underrated.
And then Alabama, they're in that Destin tournament at Emerald Coast, and they'll play either the winner of Oregon, Santa Clara after that. Oregon, what are you hearing about them? Alabama's almost matched up with them last year in that PK tournament.
Oregon's got a nice front court. It's gonna as the guards go, Oregon's gonna go. They haven't had those guard stars that Dana Altman usually has, but Biddle and Dante is a stout front court.
They get Clemson at it in the ACC SEC Challenge at
This
home.
is a gauntlet. This little stretch right here.
Then they play their former assistant coach Brian Hodgkins over at Arkansas State. Then they go to Toronto. Man, would that not have been a hell of a matchup if Bediako comes back? Him and Edey, the two Canadian kids going at it in Toronto.
And then they got Creighton. Bediako Kalkbrenner would have been
Arizona. I mean, this is a total murder from December 9th to December 20th. That's just man.
You're facing like three of the best big men in the country.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Because Ballo's back too. So I mean, and then
Ballo, Kalkbrenner.
Yeah, then the former Alabama point guard at Arizona too, Jaden Bradley transferred there. Then you got
that's a tough non-con.
Then you got Eastern Kentucky, Liberty, and Birmingham. And then their conference play opens up a little. So, like, their first four in conference, they should be 3-1, I would think. I mean, at Vandy, South Carolina at home. State, I mean, is Tolu Smith back? That'll be interesting. Because, again, that's a major mismatch. I mean, like you said, who's guarding Tolu Smith for Alabama to open up conference play if he's back? Now, he may be off to a little bit of a slow start, but, I mean, they still have DJ Jeffries. I mean, Mississippi State, an older team, and we'll get to them here in a bit. But, again, like, from a standpoint of a match, I'm just talking about a matchup for Alabama.
Right.
I mean, they're a big, thick fit. I mean, they played Alabama, 3 times last year? 2 out of the 3 games. I mean, granted, the one in Starkville, Alabama won by 12, but the one in Tuscaloosa, Mississippi State easily could have won. They were up majority of that game.
I remember that game. Yeah. I mean, and you just look at the SEC. You look at like some of the top teams and some of the big men that Alabama's going to have to guard. I mean,
like you said,
not a lot of games off.
Like you said, you saw in the non-conference slate. Like it is a little concerning. You could see, like I could see probably when NATO's got that call from Charles Bediako saying that he was probably like totally like, what? Like we didn't expect you to. I mean, who's he with now? The Spurs?
I'm not sure. I just know he's not on Alabama.
I think he's with the Spurs. But moving to my 8th ranked team, I'm going to go with speaking of, we just talked about them, the Mississippi State Bulldogs coming in at 8th for me. Let me pull up the roster for Chris Jans' second squad. Yeah, I would have had them higher if Tolu Smith doesn't get hurt. I could see them starting off a little slow. Am I crazy in thinking that?
I'm right there with you because I just have them one spot.
And I'm going to preface this by saying exactly what you said about Alabama. They're still a tournament team, I think, in my opinion.
Yes.
But I could see them starting a little slower. I mean, they're a team that with 5 starters back. I mean, their strengths are defense. They rebound. Long group. I mentioned they have mass defensively. They brought in, like you said, Andrew Taylor. I think the true freshman, I had a buddy who went to that Southern Mississippi State scrimmage. He's a big Mississippi State guy. The Josh Hubbard kid, the true freshman, is supposed to be one of their better scorers, better shooters, something they hadn't had last year. I mean, Max, you watched State last year. You even felt like they didn't even have – I feel like I watched Mississippi State most every game, and I feel like they would pass – even like their own players would pass up open looks, and it was just kind of very unsure. It's like, dude, y'all are passing up way too many looks out here in the way. I know you're not a great 3-point shooting team. I mean, I think they were the worst 3-point shoot team in the country last year.
They were.
Yeah, I mean, it was awful. I mean, then the weaknesses scoring. How do they get the 3-point shooting? I mean, it can only be better. I mean, I'm thinking Andrew Taylor from Marshall and Josh Hubbard, the true freshman, help them out. But again, is the main concern for me here with Mississippi State is how significant, how long is Tolu Smith going to be out? And even when I would say how long, like until he's kind of back. to 100%? Is it like a Liz Frank injury? I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating here. But, no, I mean, I like Mississippi State, though. I mean, Tolu Smith's healthy. We're talking about it. I mean, they may be a fourth team in the SEC.
I had them all the way up to 4th, and then
Yeah.
Tolu Smith got injured. I like what they brought in. I believe in Jans and his system. The players are really bought in. When I interviewed Andrew Taylor this offseason, I mean, the culture they had there is phenomenal. But, I mean, this is an SEC Player of the Year candidate that we don't know when he's going to be 100%.
Easily a top 2 big man in the league. I mean, probably him or Janai Broome.
Yeah.
All right, so their schedule, they open up the Barstool Sports Invitational in Chicago against Arizona State on Wednesday. I don't know much about Arizona State. Do you?
I do not, but I know that they don't have the big trees that they did last year. Warren Washington's not there anymore.
I can only watch that game on Barstool TV, huh?
Nice.
UT Martin in Starkville, North Alabama. Then they go to the Basketball Hall of Fame Classic against Washington State. Then it looks like they're staying up there. They're getting 2 up there in Connecticut, either Northwestern or Rhode Island, depending what state does. Then Nichols comes to town. ACC, SEC Challenge, Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Southern University comes to Starkville, and then they go play in that Holiday. Then they're back in Atlanta in a Holiday Hoopsgiving at Phillips Arena or Allstate Arena now against Tulane. Who else is in that? I think Auburn, Indiana is the other matchup in that thing in Atlanta this year. I think Holiday Hoopsgiving, which will be a good matchup.
And I will be there.
Yeah, that'll be a fun because last year you had LSU, K-State, and you had Memphis, Auburn, I think.
This will be my first Hoops Classic.
Yeah.
And
I think that was it last year. The SEC went 0-2 in it. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know much. I know Tulane lost Jalen Cook. But, again, like you said, Murray State, I mean, they're traditionally pretty good. You know anything about them this year?
I don't think they're going to be anything special. And right after North Texas is they caught them 1 year late. They were amazing last year with Tyler Perry, but I don't know how good North Texas will be this year. This is kind of
the Gotham Classic against Rutgers.
What are your thoughts on this non-con? It's not doing much for me.
This is probably one of the worst ones we've looked at. I mean, there's just really nobody that you're like, dang, that's a pretty – I mean, Georgia Tech, I mean, yeah, I mean, State should have a pretty – I mean, even without Tolu Smith, they should have a pretty good – I mean, I'd be shocked if they had more than 2 losses out of this. And then even more than 1, I'd be a little surprised. If not, they could easily be undefeated.
This is a good thing in the long run for them because, I mean – no disrespect to these opponents, but you'll be able to get more minutes for Josh Hubbard, more minutes for Adrian Myers, more minutes for those guys, those new guys to get into the system, and then you bring in an SEC Player of the Year candidate, and this thing could take off. It depends on his health.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at their first 4. I try to look at the first 4 and separate the schedule, the SEC schedule within quads.
They open up in a gauntlet.
Yeah, South Carolina. I mean, they should get that. And Tennessee's tough. Bama's tough. And then you're right. Their next 3 are pretty.
Could be looking at 1 and 3 to start.
But again, though, it all depends with Tolu Smith, especially that Alabama game in Starkville. It's never easy. I mean, they have a total mismatch advantage as we speak in this month. And again, not going back to Alabama, but I think they'll try to figure out something defensively. It could just take a little bit. And that game in Starkville is one of the first few conference games. But again, I'll say this: Alabama will have seen 3 really good bigs before they see Tolu Smith. So that'll be interesting that standpoint. But, yep, I had Mississippi State at 8th. Max, who you got at 7th?
I have Mississippi State at 7. So we kind of matched this up pretty well here.
It up there. So anything else to add on the Bulldogs before we move on to 6th?
I'll just add one quick thing is that Jimmy Bell Jr. They should be just so glad they got him because there's no way they could have predicted both Tolu Smith and Keshawn Murphy to go down. But to have a guy that's played significant minutes in the Big 12 to be able to fill in that role just enough to when those guys get back, I think that's just huge for this team.
All right, who do you got? We can go back to you here. Who do you have sitting here at number 7?
At 7, that is who I that's who I had.
Oh, sorry, you had Mississippi State. So for you, Mississippi State, I'm going to go 7th, Florida. I'm going to go the Florida Gators.
Yep.
Coming here at 7th, pulling up their schedule here. I mean, Riley Kugel sounds like he's kind of a under the radar guy. People are trying to pick player of the year, maybe not under the radar. I've seen him pop up a lot from a conference player of the year standpoint. I mean, he's probably the most consistent freshman last year outside of Brandon Miller. I mean, who else was really in that conversation last year from a true freshman in the league?
Probably Anthony Black was there.
Anthony. If Nick Smith's in it, he's in that as well. But I always liked watching Kugel last year. Will Richard, Walter Clayton, the transfer from Iona. We talked about Iona just a minute ago. I'm interested to see how Walter Clayton transitions over to the league. What do you think about him?
I love Walter Clayton. 43% 3-point shooter from the point guard position.
Let's see. I have it right here. Walter Clayton. Yep, he was 3-point shooter. Yep, 43.1.
43.1. I mean, and then Kugel, I think, is 40, and I think Richard's 40 also.
Yeah, Kugel was 37 last year, and Richard, you're right, 39.
Okay, so just under.
And then they bring in the UC Riverside transfer who was 39 last year in that league.
This is going to be the best shooting team. This is going to be the best shooting team in the conference.
Yeah, I keep trying to tell my buddies they're going to be one of my buddies always compares Florida basketball to Texas A&M football. It's always like they're always overhyped every year. Which I'm like, it's a pretty good analogy, but I'm like, Florida, I mean, they went and scrimmaged Miami and apparently looked pretty good, didn't they?
Yeah. I'm pretty high on this team this year. I like them a lot.
You're right. I could see this being one of the better shooting teams in the league. Like you said, I mean, they got, 4 guys rolling in at a 38% or higher last year from 3-point range. Let's go to Florida's schedule. I just saw the Gators. There we go.
I like the schedule. They got some tests.
All right, so Hall of Fame series, Virginia and Charlotte, Florida A&M, Florida State, NIT preseason tournament or tip-off, Pitt and Brooklyn. Then they play their Baylor.
Pitt's supposed to be pretty good this year.
Is Pitt supposed to be better this year?
Yeah. Pitt's got some decent guys returning.
Then Wake Forest in the ACC SEC Challenge, Merrimack, the Spiders are Richmond in the Orange Bowl Classic. And they get East Carolina.
I think they get Michigan somewhere.
Yeah, but here it is, the Jumpman Invitational in Charlotte, Michigan, December 19th, a Tuesday. Grambling, Quinnipiac, and they start off. That's weird to see Florida and Kentucky. They usually don't open up with each other, but it's an interesting. You're right. I kind of like the non-conference schedule. You got Michigan in there. So you said Pitt should be improved. Florida State should be improved.
Virginia.
Not a bad little non-conference schedule right there.
No, I mean, it's not too tough, not too light. I think they did a pretty good
job. So what is
a
concern for you for Florida this year? Is replacing Castleton, or you kind of think they bring in the what's his name? We talked about him earlier just a minute ago.
Tyrese Samuel.
Yeah.
Well, my concern would be what's behind them. You got Tyrese Samuel and Micah Hinlockton, and then behind them, I've heard good things about freshman Alex Condon, 6'11" guy that has looked pretty good so far. Thomas Hall, I think, is a 6'8" or 6'9" freshman that I've also seen some decent reports about. But, I mean, who knows? You know, Tyrese Samuel gets into some foul trouble, and you're putting a lot of weight on a Marshall transfer's shoulders, and then some freshmen. So the front court's definitely shaky with the depth.
Max, going off script here a little bit, in your opinion, who do you think is the deepest front court in the league? Is it Auburn?
This is a good question. I would say Auburn, I think, has the best because I just love that trio of Williams, Jalen Williams, Janai Broome, and Dylan Cardwell. But I think the deepest, if my honest opinion, would probably be Arkansas.
Yeah.
Just because you have so many bodies that can just be thrown out there. You have Mekhi Mitchell, Jalen Graham, Chandler Lawson, Bayfall, Denijay Harris is 6'7", Jeremiah Davenport's 6'7".
When I went back and rewatched the Purdue, the Davenport kid stood out some. I don't know what his full minutes will be. He probably don't even know that at this moment, but he looked pretty solid against Purdue. But you're right. The front court's interesting. It'll be interesting to see the teams that feel good about their depth from a front court standpoint, how they ultimately end up shaking out. Because like you said, Auburn's a team that comes back. Dylan Cardwell isn't some fantastic player, but the guy understands his role. He's been on the team for a while. He knows what BP Bruce Pearl wants. Like Janai Broome, I think he's one of the better guys. I mean, State, if they can get a little depth behind Toll, I guess we'll find out real fast. They have some time to work it out. But it's like you said, Arkansas as well. I just thought that was a decent question. I mean, Kentucky, if they can stay healthy, can have a solid backcourt as well.
Health is the issue there.
Anything to add with the Gators before we move on here?
No, just expect some shooting. Just expect FAU, expect last year's Miami. Just you're gonna have a lot of shooting on this team.
What's the ceiling floor of this team in your opinion?
So I have Florida at 5, and I think that's kind of a ceiling bet there. I think I'm expecting the shooting to really open up the floor, the big guys to come in and play 30 plus minutes and do just fine. Like I'm expecting the best from Florida.
Yeah, I expect Florida to make the tournament. I'd be a little disappointed if they did not make the tournament. I feel like that would be not a great second season for Todd Golden.
I would be very disappointed. I would say ceiling right around I think I have them at 5. I'd say ceiling, that's right around their ceiling is up there in the closer to the top half. And then floor, I mean, last year they missed the tournament, so I mean we could be seeing another disaster here.
All right, moving to number 6. Who you got here, Max?
So here's another one of my wild takes here. I know I have a few of them, but that's where I have Ole Miss.
Rebs. All right, we talked about the Rebs. We'll keep it up here.
The only thing I have to say is I know that their roster right now is not the 6th team in the SEC. I know. I understand that. This is purely me trusting in Chris Beard's ability to coach a basketball team. That's it. That's all it is. He has been coaching back to Little Rock. I think it's 7 years at the D1 level, and his lowest conference finish ever is 7th. And that was his first year at the Power 5 level with Texas Tech. So his worst ever was 7th. The past 6 years, he hasn't had a team finish outside of the top 21 in KenPom. And those Texas Tech teams didn't have talent galore. He had rock fight teams that made it work. And so I'm just trusting him to make it work again. I think you're going to get a top defense with a great rim protector and Jamarian Sharp. The offense will probably be anemic for the most part. But I'm just trusting him as a coach. That's all it is.
No, we talked about it a little. I think I would have Ole Miss about right here if Cisse and Murray were eligible. Because I was reading, so I was like, man, I was just looking at the roster. I was like, they have some guys that are kind of proven. I mean, you go back, like I said, Matthew Morrell. I mean, when he's going and can score, and he can score with the best of them. Alan Flanagan, I feel like he's been in this league since Vietnam.
Brakefield from Duke.
Yeah, Brakefield from Duke. Like I was saying, they have some guys. And if you threw in the other two, Brandon Murray's played in the league, been at Georgetown. And then you had Cisse, who was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Like you said, that had been some good key pieces for Chris Beard. But moving to 6 for me, we talked about them just a little bit, the Auburn Tigers. And I honestly feel like they can only go up from there. Like I 6 is the lowest I would have put them. And actually, the more I went back, watched some film on them, did some research on Auburn, going into this preview, I was kind of like, man, do I have them? I'll pull up the roster. Do I have them too low? I kept kind of beating myself up a little bit on them because I like their front court, man. I kind of hinted at it, the depth of it between Janai Broome, Jalen Williams, Dylan Carwell. I like that. You mentioned some other guys, though, the Chad Baker-Mazara kid coming over. I like him as well. Denver Jones, kind of a pure scorer. I do think the key here, though, for Auburn will be what does the guard play look like between Trey Donaldson and Aiden Holloway. I think one of them – I think that's what has held Auburn back the last 2 years with Zep Jasper and Wendell Green. If they get better guard play this year, it wouldn't shock me if Auburn ends up being like a top 5 seed in the tournament, like in the NCAA tournament. I mean, KD Johnson's back again. He's kind of been – he's been on the team again, like I mentioned, since Vietnam. He's been on the team in the league going back to his Georgia days. But – where does he fit in with this team? I do think this team's going to be able to score, though. But the 2 key guys I'm watching for this Auburn team, though, to see can they really hit their real ceiling, because, again, I trust the front court, is Trey Donaldson and the freshman Aiden Holloway. If those 2 guys take it to the next year, or I should say Trey Donaldson takes it up, Aiden Holloway is a better freshman than people are anticipating, Auburn's going to finish probably in the top 4 if you told me those 2 guys have good seasons. I mean, what do you think?
I think that is – you probably couldn't have set a better outlook on this team. That's exactly how I feel. Exactly how I feel. Trust the front court. Love the front court. I think Janai Broome is going to be incredible this year, and they've got good depth behind him. But Aiden Holloway's been dealing with a bit of a foot injury lately. I think he just got out of the boot. Questionable for the Baylor game. Does Trey Donaldson take a leap? He looked good in the tournament down the stretch there, made some big shots in some big games, but That's what's going to take this team either from, where'd they finish last year? I think seventh.
Seventh. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if they finish seventh again, it's because, well, Aiden Holloway and Trey Donaldson wasn't, what Bruce Pearl wanted him to be. If they are, they'll probably be, top 6, top 5 in the league.
And they have some bench guys that have been on the team for a while between Leor Berman and then the Chris Moore kid. I mean, they have some pieces there where you're like, yeah, like I think Auburn will probably be better than they were last year. But give them credit. Random game out in Sioux Falls, South Dakota against Baylor next Tuesday. I knew they were playing that. It's just funny seeing it there. They play Baylor, Southeastern, Notre Dame in the Legends Classic. Then they'll play either Oklahoma State or St. Bonaventure. Alabama A&M, they get Virginia Tech. What's Virginia Tech supposed to be like this year, Max?
I'm not huge. I haven't done a huge deep dive into the ACC, but I mean they weren't very good last year, man. They were, I think, 11th in the ACC last year.
Yeah,
they're usually always scrappy defensively, though. I mean, I trust Virginia Tech to not be a pushover.
Then they get App State at home. Then this is the game you'll be at. The Hoops Giving, Indiana. It's probably got to be one of the better games of the day on December 9th. I mean, Indiana, Auburn at State Farm Arena in Atlanta, along with the Mississippi State Tulane game.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I can't wait.
Then they go up to Huntsville and play in the Rocket City Classic against UNC Asheville. Then you got Bronny James and the boys roll into Auburn on December 17th, that Sunday, for that return trip. That USC beat Auburn last year, but the USC is returning that. Alabama State, UT Chat, Penn, and then they open up with Arkansas in conference play. I mean, man, Auburn, A&M first. Auburn's first 2 games in conference, pretty tough.
Scroll back up to that USC game. Important to note, this is a noon Sunday game.
Yeah.
So it might be a little weird.
Yeah, it's a 10 a.m. local time for USC, for their guys.
Yeah, so that game might just keep an eye on that. I know that might be a little weird there.
Yeah, Auburn's that team, though. I could see them. That's a team I could see finish in the top 4. As the season's getting closer, it's kind of like, man, I keep saying it. I like the front court. But moving to you said your 6th one, right? I'm going to pull up your graphic here at the end. Who is your 5th?
My 5th is Florida, actually. I think you had them at 7.
Yep, we talked about.
So yeah, I'm right. We're pretty much right in the middle of the pack. I just expect, I'm betting on the ceiling. That's all it is.
And again, I was talking to my buddy before we got on the show today. He's a big Alabama basketball. I kept telling him, I was like, dude, I think you could flip a coin a little bit. And if you did Florida, Alabama, and Auburn and said they finished 5th, 6th, or 7th, and you pulled any order out of the hat between that 5th, 6th, and 7th, I would be like, yeah. I mean, I totally see that. You know what I mean? I totally see that. I could easily see any of those teams finishing that. I think Florida's a little bit like me and you talked about. I was telling you about one of my other friends who follows college basketball. He's kind of, I want to see it with Florida, but it's one of those things. It's like one of those things in college football people get caught up with. It's like just because they haven't doesn't mean they can't. Like at some point, you have 4 guys shooting over 38% from beyond the arc. Should translate over this year. So you got Florida coming in over at 5. I got Alabama. We talked about Alabama already some, but I mentioned Alabama at 5 again. I mean, I'm kind of the opposite with them and Auburn. Their front court concerns me. Their guards, I think they're going to be fine.
Yep.
I think Latrell Wrightsell, we didn't talk about him. I think the Cal State Fullerton transfer, he'll be fine. He'll fit into that. Kind of a scrappy guy. I think Aaron Estrada is going to be one of the better newcomers just from looking at his stats in the scrimmages and from reading some stuff on their behind closed door, like practice stuff. Mark Sears coming back. I think just Rylan Griffin. I mean, he's a guy I was kind of waiting on a little bit to take it to the next level after having like kind of a little roll off the bench last year. But again, it's like me and you talk about. I mean, he was one of the better offensive rebounders in the Big 12 last year. Can that translate? Do they get the Mo Diabate kid, the true freshman to come in and step up? And Sam Walters looks like he can score, he can shoot, but if he's a liability defensively, a weakness of the team, how does Nate Oates utilize him? Obviously he's going to come off the bench, but it'll be interesting how many minutes he gets. But again, I got Alabama coming in at 5, and then we're moving to the top 4. Who is your 4th team?
My 4th, we just talked about him, is Auburn. And once again, it's just I'm kind of betting on I have not heard such a good breakdown of Auburn. if Aiden Holloway and Trey Donaldson don't perform, I might look like a little bit of an idiot. They might fall down back to middle of the pack. I think Aiden Holloway is going to be good. I've seen as much as I can see of him. I've watched as much as I can watch. He's a great shooter. I'm kind of worried about the injury right now, but that's all it is. I think that this team is not much separating them from my 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th team. It's just that I trust the front court a lot. I know what I'm getting out of that. I really like Chad Baker-Mazara as a wing, 6'7", has played. I'm drawing a blank on the San Diego State coach's name, but has played in a very good defensive system before, understands how to guard the perimeter. So there's a little bit more I can trust with Auburn than other teams, and that's why I have them out kind of closer to the top. But you absolutely nailed it, Dave, with your breakdown.
And then my 4th place team, I'm going to have the Kentucky Wildcats. I'm going to have the youth coming in here. And again, I did not feel good about this. Pull up the roster here with until I really watched them in that global tournament where they represented the United States and ended up winning that in what? It was Toronto. Am I right? Remember that in this past summer?
It was in Toronto, yes.
It was Toronto. They proved they could score a little bit. Now, if they can stay healthy, I mean, we talk about Aaron Bradshaw, first guy on the list, obviously, right off the bat, as we talk about injuries. But my concern is, what about the comp? Both guys need to score, need the rock in their hand between Dillingham and DJ Wagner. How is that going to go over? I know Cal does traditionally one of the better jobs with managing a freshman team. It's like you said, I mean, if they didn't bring in Trey Mitchell or get Antonio Reeves back, we probably both have them lower than what we currently have them. But my main question is what I just said, just backtracking, will be just how Rob Dillingham, DJ Wagner, and them, how they kind of separate, how they handle both wanting to score. Because wasn't that the blue-white game? What was it? Didn't Dillingham have like 40?
Dillingham looked phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, there's not enough shots to go around for everybody. So I'll be interested to see how they handle it. It's not saying they can't. I'll just be interested to see how they handle that.
Yeah, I wish I had the answers because it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But I think it's a good problem to have. I'll put it that way. Having an overload of I'll call it talent. 2 guys that play the same way. If Cal can figure it out, man, they're going to have some speed. One thing I'll say is they have both put on a lot of weight.
Yeah, I was literally about to talk about that because I was reading Cal talking about they're not very thick, but yeah, you said they've added some weight.
Both of them have put on, I think, 20 plus. Both of them. So they've definitely gotten them ready for SEC caliber physicality.
All right, going to the schedule. Let me go to the schedule. Yeah, like you said, I had to go back and watch that summer tournament back in the summer to really get on board completely with the Cats from that standpoint. Let me pull up the schedule again. They always.
This is my favorite non-con schedule in the league. I love this. I love this schedule.
All right, here we go. So, all right.
I think they did a great job setting this up.
All right, so they open up with New Mexico State on Monday and Texas A&M Commerce. Then they get the Jayhawks. They play Kansas and Chicago in the Champions Classic. Then they get Stonehill at home, St. Joseph's, Marshall. Then they get Miami in the ACC SEC Challenge. That is a big one. At Rupp, UNC Wilmington, Penn, North Carolina, and Atlanta. I knew they were playing North Carolina. I totally forgot that game is in Atlanta.
I'll be there.
Louisville. They should handle it.
Yeah.
Illinois State, the fighting Antonio Reeves. And then they get into conference play against Florida. You're right. This is a good non-con. I mean, they always play.
I really like how they set it up where they kind of spaced out their big games. They got 3 big games, Kansas, Miami, and North Carolina, and they kind of segmented them so that they'll have a little bit of space in between each one. I like the way it's
the opposite of the Alabama schedule of just 3 games in a row of of Creighton, Purdue, and Arizona.
That is a gauntlet.
But no, I'm with you. I like Kentucky. Them bringing Trey Mitchell, so West Virginia's loss is Kentucky's gain, and then getting Antonio Reeves back, I think really pushed me over the edge. And like I said, watching them in that global tournament representing Team USA, put me over the edge. So I like them at 4 to finish in that top 4 and Cal and them. And then who's your number 3?
We are right on track, man. I got Kentucky at 3. Just same thing that everything you just said. but I think just Reed Shepherd is worth a mention. He's just kind of bubbled in with this great recruiting class, and he's just kind of shoved in underneath DJ Wagner and Dillingham and Edwards and Bradshaw, and I think he should be right there with him. This guy's very good. That's all. I'm not going to get too long-winded about it, but they have more guard depth than I think most people think.
So we both got Kentucky in the top 4. Going to my third team, we talked about them already, so I'm not going to be long-winded as well. Texas A&M. It's kind of like the veteran presence, like Wade Taylor. But again, I see what you see. I mean, we have to pull up the schedule roster again. I don't overly like the ceiling. It's more the floor. I know what I'm getting when I look at the roster, and I have more faith in seeing like, all right, like. But again, wouldn't shock me if they finish 5 and 6. I don't know if they get to what 8 or 9 you have, which they may.
It's a little
personally,
little
I don't think. But I like them consistently. They finished second last year. I think they still stay in that top 3. But again, I don't think the ceiling. I don't think this team can get past the Sweet 16 if they went to the tournament. Because again, they're just defensive style. They go play someone hot like Penn State. Their last 2 games they played last year just got torched. Yeah, so I could see that happen again. I'm with you. I really the floor has me for Texas A&M. But who do you have at number 2? So we both probably have the same 2 teams since we both hadn't talked about either one of them. But who you got at 2?
At 2, I have Arkansas.
Same here, so we can talk about them at the same time.
Beautiful
roster.
Beautiful. I actually had this team at number 1 back in June when I made my first the season just ended reaction. Because Muss, he always hits the ground running with the portal. They had a bunch of additions early. But I like the balance. There's not many holes on this team. You have great guard depth, you got wing depth, and you got big depth, and you got a lot of shooting. You brought in Khalif Battle, who was, I think it's Caliph Battle, actually, is how you say it.
Yeah, the kid from Temple.
Yeah, kid from Temple who was either first or second in the American in threes per game. So you just got shooters. It's a balanced team, and like we said earlier, Dave, this team was number 9 when they played Creighton last year before the Brazil injury. This is a top 10 team in my eyes.
I'm with you. I think this is Muss's deepest team that he's had.
Yeah.
Like you said, I was watching the game against Purdue, and you see all these guys obviously, I'll say, I was going to ask you at the end of our show here, but I'm probably going to go Trevon Brazile as the SEC Player of the Year. Then I thought the Davenport kid looked pretty good. You got Devo Davis coming back. It feels like he's been there for a while. L. Ellis coming over from Louisville. Like you mentioned, Bayfall. Jalen Graham's played a lot last year. Tremont Mark, you said from Houston's going to be a big one. I even forgot they had the Keon Minifield kid, the kid from Washington.
He's going to be redshirting this year. But
is he redshirting this year?
That just goes to show how many guards they have.
Yeah, it was between them and Alabama for him. And then they got one of the Mitchell twins back, Mackay, and then their shooter, big Joseph Pinion. See if he can get any. I'm sure his minutes will be cut down this year due to as long as they don't have the injuries they had last year and just the depth they brought in. But let's look at the Razorback schedule. You're right, though. I do think these 2 teams. Obviously, Tennessee's going to be one for both of us just due to process of elimination. But I think these 2 teams are the clear 2 teams in the league heading into the season. I would be shocked if you kind of had somebody better than finishing in the top 2. I guess maybe A&M you could make a case just with who's coming back. But
you can make the arguments
Alcorn
there.
State, Gardner-Webb, Old Dominion, UNC Greensboro. Then they go to the battle for Atlantis. Play Stanford. Hey, Memphis again could be playing another SEC team. That'd actually be a good matchup. You had Memphis versus Arkansas in the second round of that.
That would be.
So and Memphis or Michigan.
The massive game.
Oh man, yeah, Duke.
I think this is actually going to be the biggest game of the entire year in terms of viewership and attendance and hype and everything. I think this might be a top 3 game of the year.
Absolutely, the Dukies will be there. That is Bud Walton. That'll be a big game. And Furman, who knocked off Virginia last year, tournament team.
Good team.
I think Auburn beat them in a scrimmage recently. And then Crimson and Cardinal Classic. That looks like they're starting to play that every year in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Arkansas beat them last year. Lipscomb, Abilene Christian, UNC Wilmington. Yeah, I feel like Muss and them kind of do their tournament, and they'll play 1 or 2 other big non-cons, and that's it. They don't really – but it's a solid slate. Again, some of that tournament, it just all depends what those 2 teams – depending if you play Memphis or Michigan, depending on what those 2 teams do. But again, not a bad non-conference schedule. You got any thoughts on it?
I like it. I just think it's a little top heavy with all of the pressure in the world being on that Duke game. If you don't, if Duke comes into Bud Walton and walks in and beats the Razorbacks, how are we gonna feel coming out of this non-con? I mean, they'll be like, okay, they beat Stanford, they beat Oklahoma.
Who else is in that battle for Atlantis on the other side of that bracket besides them? I didn't know who. It's obviously them, Stanford, Memphis, and Michigan, but they had another game in there as a potential. But I don't know who else is on the other side of that. That's usually a pretty good tournament.
It is.
I think Tennessee beat Kansas in it last year, right?
I think there's Texas Tech and Villanova are two solid teams.
Yeah, they usually. I think didn't Tennessee win that? They beat Kansas in the championship, I think, last year.
Yes, you're right.
I think Tennessee won that last year. But yeah, Arkansas, I'm with you. I think this could be one of Muss's best teams, have a real shot to win the regular season. And then number one, you finish us off here, Max. Obviously, it's going to be the Tennessee Volunteers. I was so impressed with them on Sunday playing Michigan State, especially without Vescovy and Ziegler.
Yeah, I think this is the best team in the country right here, especially when they're healthy. Dalton Connect, probably going to be like, I think we have a category later on, Newcomer of the Year.
Yeah.
Might just spoil it right there. This guy's going to be incredible. Passes the eye test, passes every test you want to give him. They're just name a something you don't like about Tennessee in years past, and they fixed it. You don't like the offense. They brought it in with shooting, with Gainey and Connect, and Dillion is a redshirt freshman that's already been with the program. You need rim protection. You got Awaka and Adu. Adu is even splashing threes now. They're playing 5 out sometimes. I mean,
who was it at the big summer? Was it Awaka? Yeah, Toby Awaka had the big summer.
Awaka had a huge summer. There's nothing to not like about this team.
No, I like this team, especially. I mean, like you said, you mentioned Gainey. They got Triple J, Josiah Jordan James. Yeah, like Dalton Connect. I mean, you're right. It's just a really good team. I mean, it really was. I think they started off against Michigan State, 18-1?
I mean, yeah, without like 2 potential
veteran players. Yeah,
all SEC players. It's like, geez.
Pull up the Vols.
And Michigan State had pretty much a full team. They had
Walker was doing his thing. He was doing his thing like he always does. But again, that's a massive win for Tennessee. I know it's just an exhibition, but Lenore they beat the crap out of Lenore Ryan last night.
Yeah, it was
1948. Then Tennessee Tech on Monday, Wisconsin on Friday. What are the Badgers supposed to look like out of the Big Ten this year?
So some interesting news today. Their big man, their freshman Gus Yalden, is taking like a personal leave from the team. Yeah, right now. So I don't know. Wisconsin was supposed to be a pretty decent team, but if they lose their big man and now they're going against Adu and Awaka,
Then you got Wofford, could be 1-0 against the SEC after tonight, rolling in there in their third game. Then Tennessee goes to Maui, so they're in the Maui Invitation. I knew this. They open up with Syracuse. Then they play the winner of Purdue and Gonzaga in the second round.
Amazing tournament, amazing Maui this year.
Yeah, the Maui, like you said, lineup this year is probably one of the best it's been in a while. They'll get a third game there. And they get North Carolina, the ACC SEC Challenge in Chapel Hill. George Mason.
And then they get Illinois also.
Yep. Then Illinois
just beat Kansas.
Georgia Southern. We talked about that. NC State. Because who else is that in that Hall of Fame? It's NC State. Then it's who's it? Ole Miss. We said Ole Miss and it was another SEC team. It was Ole Miss and I forgot who it was. It's another SEC team. They get Tarleton State, Norfolk State, then they open up with Ole Miss. But I'm with you. I think Tennessee right now probably looks like the best. I know we ain't even started a regular season game, but probably looks like the best team in the country right now. I think the top 2 are easy. Let's pull up your final graphic before we get into the superlatives and get out of here. I had your graphic up here that you posted today. Let's see.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, there it is. I thought I had it. Let me see. We'll go to it.
There we go. Should be my pinned.
Yep.
There we go.
right here. So Max had Tennessee 1, Arkansas 2, Kentucky 3, Auburn 4, Florida 5, Ole Miss 6, Mississippi State 7, Alabama 8th, Texas A&M 9, Vanderbilt 10th, Missouri 11th, Georgia coming in at 12th, LSU 13th, and South Carolina coming in 14th. And I'll post my graphic for everybody listening probably tomorrow. I told her I sent it to her. She's going to get it done for tomorrow. So I'll post that on social media. But before we get you out of here, Max, again, appreciate you joining us. For everybody that doesn't already follow him, go give him the follow on Twitter. Does a fantastic job with college basketball. I talk to him pretty regularly about college hoops. Fantastic, just great overall guy. But let's get into it. Last one. Who is your SEC player of the year?
My player of the year is Janai Broome, Auburn, center, just because of the sheer numbers. I think player of the year is a bit of a statistical award as well as eye test award, but I think he's going to average near a double-double. I think the numbers are going to be hard to beat with Tolu Smith being out now. But if I had to do a flyer on someone else, if Tennessee's the best team and Dalton Connect's the best player on that team, averaging the most points on that team, it would be hard to not have him in that conversation.
That's where I went. I was going Dalton Connect or Trevon Brazile just to be different, but I'll go with Trevon Brazile from Arkansas coming off the injury for me. Max, coach of the year, who you got?
I took the cop-out one with this one because I went with Rick Barnes just because I think that team's going to be so good. But if I'm talking like true, like who do I think has to coach the hardest and has the hardest
seed where they were preseason ranked, yeah,
just like the hard like needs to coach, I'm gonna go with Coach Cal because of just how crazy this offseason's been, the amount of pressure and the amount of hate that Coach Cal's gone. Oh, I mean, if he can take this group of freshmen in a late transfer and a late international big, and if he can make them go like top 3. I think it's going to be hard to not have him in the conversation.
No, I agree. I'll go with Rick Barnes as well. And then a sleeper kind of would be, if they got into the tournament, you could see Todd Golden getting it, depending how well Florida finishes as well.
I like that.
SEC Freshman of the Year.
Freshman of the Year. Now, this one, you can just kind of take your pick. I think there's some great freshmen in this conference this year. But I went with DJ Wagner.
Yeah, Kentucky's that's funny. I did the same. Kentucky's going to play so many. It's kind of an easy Kentucky's the easy pool there.
Yeah, I'll ask you this, Dave. If you had to pick a freshman of the year not on Kentucky, who would you pick? Because there's a few.
Let's think. Not on Kentucky. See, that's the guy. Let's see. You
got.
I like Josh Hubbard from Mississippi State.
Nice. Oh, that's a great answer.
I was gonna probably go Josh Hubbard, Mississippi State, just because I could see him improving. They're just overall. He could be their best shooter on their team. Just walking into the gym day one.
Man, I was gonna say that. That's a phenomenal answer.
I could see Josh Hubbard, and then transfer of the year for you.
My transfer of the year, I guess you know who I'm going to say with Dalton Connect. But since we've just talked about him so much, and since I've dragged Kentucky a lot, Grant Nelson. And Grant Nelson, because they're going to rely on him for so much. They're going to rely on, he's going to have to be whatever. You know how there's like the old adage, like, oh, this transfer came in, let's cut his time in half or cut his numbers in half or something.
Yeah. You feel like that's kind of the low hanging fruit, what people do.
Yeah. Alabama can't afford that with Grant Nelson. He has to be a star. So that's I think Grant Nelson might be up there also.
I'm going to stick with the same team as you, but a different guy, Aaron Estrada. I'm going to go with Estrada. I like him at guard, the true point. Still going to let Sears stick at that 2 spot. So I'm going to go with Estrada. And then the last question before we get you out of here, Max. How many teams from the SEC make the tournament this year, in your opinion?
So what I've seen the norm is being 8, but I'm going to go 9. I'm going to go 9 because I think – where are we? Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Auburn, Alabama is an easy 5 that I would say is definitely in. And then out of I like Ole Miss. I'm sorry, I like them. Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Florida, and then throw in maybe one of the
Vandy,
Mizzou, Georgia, if one of them does well.
Yeah.
I think we get 9.
I'm gonna go with 8. Same number as last year. I'm gonna go with 8. But no, you gotta be a crazy year for the state of Mississippi. If both I can't even remember the last time that probably happened. Both Mississippi schools make the tournament the same year.
Last night, my partner at Southeastern 14, Blake, said if the line was set at an even -110, the amount of teams in the tournament is 8.5. What would you bet, over or under? I said it would be a no bet for me. I wouldn't be able to do it.
I'd probably go. Just got said 8. I'll probably go under. Yeah.
Probably. That is such a good line though for this conference.
Well, Max, man, I appreciate you. We covered a ton. We talked all 14 teams. We talked, player of the year, coach of the year, freshman of the year, transfer of the year, how many teams got into the tournament. We went an hour 45, dude. It was a blast.
Ooh.
It's here. College basketball is here. It's pullover season. Got some frost on the windshield out there. It's here. Monday we'll be here, dude. I appreciate you joining us. And again, guys, if you don't follow Max, it's a fantastic job for Southeastern 14. Go give him the follow at Max Barr. Max, you got anything else to add before we get you out of here?
I could have done another hour 45.
For sure.
I am so pumped up.
I love college football, worked in it for 10 years. But, dude, I love talking college basketball and watching college basketball.
I could do it all day long, all night long, man. Thanks for having me on. I love what you're doing with the Mock 10 podcast. The daily content is great. Guys, keep tuning in. Subscribe. Do what you got to do to support this man, Dave, because he's really putting in the time.
I appreciate you, brother. Again, appreciate you joining us. Let's have a hell of a season.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much.
Have a good night, brother.
All right. Take care.